Josh, thanks for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining this webinar. Right, this is me, Chandra Alluri. It's been 25 years into IT industry, right? So performed various kind of functions within the software engineering, from analysis to validation of the requirements, right, including the development as well. For the last few years, I've been doing the management consulting within the financial services industry, and now I'm currently with the Radiant Digital as director of the technology. Okay. Today, want to share our journey with RPA, right? We have been watching this RPA all the way from early 2000, right? So we know how it began, why it began, right? So how it transformed itself in last 2 decades, and then where we think it's going to go from here, right? So why it's important to know the audience is if you know what was the cause for its emergence, right, or for its existence, you'll be better equipped to know how and where and when to apply RPA to cater to your problems, right, and come up with the better solutions. Okay. So I'm going to go through, right? So introductions are done, right? We'll take you through the audience of RPA and how it evolved from in the last 2 decades, right? And if at all, if you're considering for the RPA solutions, what are the key things that you need to consider, right, among the solutions that are available over there, right? And also want to share some critical success factors, right? So through our own, compiled through our own experience. We have done wide variety of implementations of RPA solutions. I will share so that way it will help you to keep few things in mind. And also we'll shed some light on what we think is going to be the future of RPA, right? Future in the sense like how it's going to evolve, further evolve from here. At the end, as Josh mentioned, we'll leave room for Q&A, right? We'll take questions, but if you have any additional questions, please mail us, right? So the contact details are given. We'll be happy to get back to you. So without further ado, just briefly, there's some notion whenever we see the word robot or robotics, right? We kind of have notion that it's going to be some kind of a hardware involved, right? But in this RPA, just want to give you that fact that it's a purely a notional bot, right? It's a software bot. Okay. Otherwise, like you must be well aware of the robotics part of it. Okay. So the origins of RPA, right? So most of you have known this. Most of you have known this, right? So this quest for efficiency in the business, right? The improvements in the productivity, it's been there, right? It's been there ever since the industrial revolution started, right? Along with the industrialization, there are like multiple maturity models. Especially, you can see how the manufacturing industry led the way in process optimization with various models, right? So we also see how IT industry adopted those models and even took it to the next level, right? If you look at most of the ISO 9000 functions, it's mostly adopted from the mechanical engineering side of it, side of the engineering, right? So earlier, like what are the best options? And if they want to improve the productivity or improve the speed of production, right? The options are like very limited, right? So one, you shift your resources, right, to most, where the labor is economical, the laws are favorable, right? You choose those regions, right? So the low value functions, you kind of outsource them, right? Either to other organizations or to the partners, right? The other thing is you completely offshore work to the countries, right? And the first option, it's kind of within the mainland, wherever the locations are economical, that's where the work is to shift, right? The last one, offshoring to the partners, right? So instead of managing that work, right, so across the border or beyond the border, right? So the company started finding new partners who can deliver that services. So delivery risk, they're going to put it on the partners. and then they're going to own the quality risk, right, to deliver the final value to the end customer. So these are limited options. But if you carefully see through the common thread in all these options, right, we can say the common denominator is the cost of labor, right? That's what they were aiming at, right? The more you bring down the cost of labor, right? So they related that single factor to multiple other things, whether they increase the productivity, bring in more, adding more resources to produce more amount of work, right, at the same price. But that has been a common denominator for a very long time. Okay. So what supported these factors is, right, so there's a just-in-time techniques, right, especially from Toyota and from Japanese manufacturing industry that helped. So right, using those techniques, instead of planning everything upfront, organizations started with the help of partners, right, multiple teams across the globe, taking the time advantage as well, right? So how to bring various things together with a good planning, right? So that's the other factor. And at the same time, if you look at globally, more number of skill resources, especially the outsourcing has been there from the Western countries, right? So there's a lot of English speaking resources available across the globe that really helped, right? In addition, right, so the globalization and also the fact the trade pacts at NAFTA all helped for the countries to come together and work in tandem for the common cause of improving the overall life for everyone. Okay, so this is, I mean, if you study the RPA evolution, right? So all the causes fall back into this and goes back to that time period. The next set of things, like in 2000 to 2010, right? There were solid roots in 1990s that helped, right? So organizations started understanding the repetitive business processes, right? Mostly you have seen in the HR, finance, right, and some IT and business operation things. I mean, this is where you have seen the evolution of the ERP solutions, whether it is from the Oracle Financials or SAP, the C-bills, right? We would have seen multiple ERP solutions, but that's where they started. Anything, the process that's repeatable, right? They try to automate that with the software processes, right? And then they build the packages to make operations more efficient, right? So that was a prime focus in 2000. But at the same time, if you're there in the industry, many of you would have been doing this knowingly or unknowingly, right? Even writing some macros in your spreadsheets or writing some utilities, right? Whatever, for example, if you have to execute some SQL queries, you used to write those queries and then put it on the Unix job schedulers, right? And they used to run from time and time again, right? We would have done in one way or the other, right? So that's what we would have experienced in early 2000 to 2010, right? At the same time, especially for the folks who are in the validation domain of the software engineering, right? So you would have used the record and replay kind of automation tools, right? So where your automation scripts identify the objects on the screen and collect some data, right? Simply, we can call it a screen scraping technologies, right? So they are coming widely available at that time, right? And at the same time, we would have seen many business process automation tools, right? Especially the rules engines, right? We would have seen multiple rules engines, right? Pega is one thing. It's been there and still it's evolving as we speak, right? And also the artificial intelligence, it started, I mean, people started speaking about artificial intelligence because all these processes still are managed by the people, right? Still, people are operating on the software and doing these functions, right? So in that decade, the main focus has been on the business processes, but still there's an assumption that humans remain on top of these processes. Okay, so these are the factors. This is what happened in the first decade. Okay, in the next part of in the second decade, right? It's mostly people started, okay, so there's some mundane tasks that people have to do, especially some kind of push the buttons kind of thing, very low value, low risk things, right? People started thinking, okay, how do we even automate these aspects of it, right? So pretty much where they think human can be taken out of the loop, right? So organizations started thinking about it. That's what helped, especially the screen scraping tools, to evolve even better, right? So to go and take some authentication factors and do click those buttons as well, just mimicking the actions of the users. Right? This is when even the automation tools have become more complicated and sophisticated, helped doing some complex automation. Okay. So that's where it started. So the next phase of RPA application, right? RPA really took shape in this decade, right? People started applying to their desktop operations, very complex business processes. Earlier, like it's simple, the point-to-point automation was there, running the script and getting the results, validating and taking to the next step. It's a kind of a discretionary functions. But with the help of the tools, people were able to automate the complete processing, including humans, some decisions, right? So that's been considered. They also applied these things to, especially for the reporting, where heavy manual intervention is required, right? So these automation tools started easing these reporting functions, because reporting function is something that happens more frequently, and it's like very laborious, time-consuming, repetitive process. So this is where they started applying, and then finally swivel sharing, so where people has to look into multiple systems, stare into multiple screens, compare them, get the results, and then compare and then provide to cohesive answer for the customer or for their own conclusion, right? That's what this swivel sharing is. So this is where RPA process really helped business users, okay, which used to take a lot of time. It eased them to get the answers quickly and with little intervention, okay. And this is where people, especially the business users, started seeing the productivity enhancements within their organizations, right? Because it's purely time consuming, and no brain required. It's just like need to get the information in one place so that they can quickly make the decision. Okay, so the swivel sharing and reporting, this really propelled the usage of RPAs within their businesses with less resistance. Okay. And what triggered or what helped to take off this RPA usage of RPA is, one is the platforms have become very sophisticated, right? So they understand who their user going to be, the business user, right? So they know with the little IT expertise they should be able to do. So that's the reason like they started introducing codeless automation. Pretty much any user with little bit of a training, they should be able to automate their process, right? That's one thing. We also see the increased use of AML, because there are some very complex processes um, of late RPS were able to do. We'll talk in a bit on that one, right? The digital transformation, right? So the digital transformation forcing organizations to rebuild their applications, take customer inputs more into uh, their decision-making process and improve the systems, making the systems dynamic, right? On one hand, they're doing it while they're introducing new channels in the form of mobile and the web channels, right? But they cannot completely displace their old age-old system that's working very well, right? So this is where RPA became very handy for these organizations, right? Without having to eliminate or replace or immediately optimize, right? So these RPA solutions really help them. At least they gave some breathing time for them to improve the operational efficiency at low cost. Okay. Also, at the same time, the increase in outsourcing costs, because earlier, what are the low value function, right? They think they can outsource to economical locations, right? But what used to be the cost saving, right, in the early period of this century, and now that has reduced, right? So, and if you do the ROI with what RPA can do over here versus outsourcing that particular function elsewhere, you can do very good. You'll get very good return on investment using RPA solutions, right? That has been one of the selling point. And also the other factor is the aging workforce, right? The workforce especially gained tremendous knowledge on the IT systems in the last 3 decades, right? As they phase out to the retirements, there should be some mechanism to retain that knowledge, as obviously, I mean, automation is the best way to retain that knowledge. RPS, again, became very handy in this situation, right? Helping the workforce, taking that knowledge, right? Taking those processes, automating those processes. At least organizations have, in one way or the other, that knowledge retained in the form of automation. Okay. So this has been the story of RPA until now, right? So yeah. So here, I mean, many success stories, right? So we have done wide variety of implementations. I'll talk through in the next few slides, right, based on giving some, sharing some experience and offering some of our insights, what needs to be done. So that might be helpful to you. Okay. So as we mentioned, the RPA platforms started evolving. Like many of you would have either used or known these platforms. It could be UiPath or it could be Blue Prism, Kofax. There are multiple solutions out there available. Okay. So it's based on, I mean, if at all, if you're inclining to use or at least hopping onto one of these platforms, there are a few things that needs to be considered, right? All pretty much, we have analyzed pretty much all the major platforms, right? All seems to be similar, but there are like slight subtleties. I'm not going there. But some of the key things, what anyone should keep in mind is, right? So, I mean, these are the things I'm going to talk about, right? So one is the user interface. It has to be like very intuitive. The business users, I myself have witnessed some naive business users able to simply automate their processes, right? So some such functions, whatever they do on a daily basis, they were able to do with a little training. So make sure, right? So the intuitive, the interface and how to use must be intuitive to your business users, right? So whenever you find a solution, keep your business user with less IT knowledge as the key stakeholder, right? So if you think from that standpoint, that will help you in choosing the right platform. Okay. The other thing is the analytical, the rich analytical suite. So it generates RPS solutions can generate a lot of data because it's an automation. It's just like once we automate, we can able to do multiple things. And these platforms have very good capabilities in terms of analytics, right? So even they have very advanced image analytics that will help you in instead of you doing it manually, they themselves can do. So make sure that analytical function is there within the platform, right? The third one, it's self-explanatory, the scriptless automation, right? Most of, again, if you keep your business user in mind, right, for the usage of RPA, obviously it has to be scriptless, but so still we'll come to, or I can share my thoughts. So the way we did in one of the implementation is we let business users, we train the business users, right? As a best practice, we don't want to do the automation for them. So we let them do automate their own processes, right? The simple processes that we identified, they automated, right? So using just the record and replay, for lack of better words, that's what I'm saying, the feature. And they're able to configure and run the script at will, right? Now we look at that script. So now business users had to spend less time with us as a solution provider, right? So we understood what they're doing, right? So we understood what the script is doing. They're able to accomplish their job. And thereafterwards, obviously, there are some optimizations we could do, right? So that really helped. One, that gave satisfaction to the business user, and number two, it helped us to quickly understand what they're doing, right? So that really helped. That's the beauty of that scriptless automation. Okay. The next one is the structured and unstructured documentation. As I said, the platforms, pretty much all the platforms have this feature. Again, you might have to read the barcode, or you might have to read the image, or you might have to read some handwritten notes on the applications. Recently, for one of the government applications, we have done this, where applications are submitted in the PDF format. Right? There's a hand-filled fields, and then the officials would put some notes, the handwritten notes, right? So where this RPA solution was able to scan it and then derive the intelligence out of out of that information, right, of the scanned information, right? So make sure that's a very important feature, right? The next one is the integration ability of this RPA solutions to integrate with your multiple platforms, especially with your legacy systems. That's very important. Okay. Batch processing, again, if you had to run this, run some functions in a batch, right? So it's a scheduler job, but again, you need to understand how to schedule them, how to queue them, right? So some platforms make it easy for you to enable this batch processing, right? And also the data validation, right? So as we talked in the first point, I mean, the second point on the analytical suite, there's a lot of data that gets generated, right? So, and a lot of RPA tools, they have this comparative analytics comparison mechanisms, right, with which you can validate the data as well. So make sure there's again there's subtleties in the depth of validation. So make sure that I mean that whatever you need, right? So the platform has the audit tracing, especially these days, it's very important, especially when you are automating the process with RPA. You need to make sure it's the processing as well as the decisions are auditable. But that's this feature is especially very important, especially for the what I experienced in the financial services processes and any business sensitive processes. This must be there, right? And again, the management console, here is where a lot of platforms offer you to configure the users, the roles, right, who can perform the multiple things and assign those things to the particular bots, the software bots, I mean, right? So make sure it's a configurable and easy to manage. Automated process discovery, again, as we discussed on how it enables the business users. When business users perform their activity, um, perform like complete one business processes, right? So if you let the bot to take a look at it, right? So it can really come up with multiple paths to what user has done. There are some, this is where some platform they call say intelligent automation, they really optimize this entire process and they can provide better suggestions as well. Okay. Unattended robots, again, where business sensitive, right? You don't give that complete control to bot, right? So you will have some human in the loop, but most of the processes, right? So bots can be run unattended, so but they have to be scheduled. And obviously, when the audit tracing is enabled, so you know what they're doing and what they have performed if something goes wrong, right? And at the same time, it should be able to deal with multiple data sources, right? It could be from simple spreadsheets, XLS, CSV to complicated XML and JSONs, right? So, I mean, some of the platforms are able to read the inputs from those files and perform some complex processes, right? So these are the some of the features you can find in most of the platforms, but every feature has its subtlety based on what you need, right? So that's very important, right? Because their pricing also vary based on these features. So it's important for you to know what you need rather than what they provide, and then go and check. So that makes the decision easy for you to go with these platforms. Okay. Time check. Wow. The next one is the critical success factors. Again, this is where want to share with what we have done with multiple validations, right? The expertise is very important. So for example, in one of the major implementation, what we learned was what RPS can do is pretty phenomenal, but there's a lot of legwork that's required, right? We need to understand the business processes. You need to, if you want to re-engineer the process, right, you can apply some Six Sigma principles to see, find the bottlenecks, how you can optimize, right? And you may have to write some scripts here and there, some macros here and there as well. So in one of the implementation, what we did, we have 8,000 lines of Python code that's running behind the scenes, right? So what RPA helped on in taking the human out of loop, but there's a lot of backend processing that's very difficult to do with RPA itself, right? So that expertise, especially in the initial stages, it's very important for you. The second one is you empower the users, right? So one of the advice is not to have more RPA solution for, implementers, right? Let business users do, right? So train them, empower them, upskill them, let them do, and then you come back and optimize of what they have done, right? That's very important because getting the buy-in from the business users is make it easy to implement RPA. The next one is the lean governance, right? So definitely this needs to be governed properly, right? So need to understand what business processes are important, what are less important, what are most frequently run. So I mean, there's just multiple questionnaires that are available. It's based on that you can come up with risk scoring, and then you let the RPA to take one process by the other process. So that way you can see the steady implementation of RPA and more ROI generated out of RPA implementation. Okay. Right. The next one is agile management. Again, this can be done. So we used, instead of simple scrums, we applied the Kanban methodology because we know how many processes we want to do. We know the end result, so it's about managing the end result. So it's more easy to apply the Kanban methodology, right? So this we were able to integrate with organization's methodology as well. So that's something very important. So all these things will help you, one, tell a consistent and cohesive story for your customers or your upper management, and you also show the study and proven progress of this implementation. Metrics and measurement here has to be very careful. You know, one advantage of these bots is they're tireless, right? So that's the beauty of them, right? So they can go on and on, but at the same time, some of the ROIs will get easily inflated. So make sure that return on investment, right, or what the metrics you're putting is more meaningful, right, and realistic. Okay, that's what we do. And again, this is even once you implement, you have to constantly monitor. You'll find a lot of options. Even after 6 months, where we thought the process are stable, we still see the room for improvements, and we constantly take care of them. Yeah. Finally, the future of RPA. So here, RPA already started leveraging AI/ML, right? And especially in one of the recent implementations where multiple images of geospatial data has to be matched, compared, right, and then take the decision. It's impossible manually. It takes much time, right? And there's error prone. Using AI/ML techniques, right, and especially for the image analytics, we have very good success. I think that trend will go. That gives more and more confidence to bring in more and more complex business processes to RPA, right? So businesses are getting more comfortable. We are seeing with our clients as well as we speak. The other thing is the conversational chatbots, right? So we have recently did this one. Conversational chatbot, they can, where a operational user can ask, okay, what's the status of my equipment, right? It's a conversation you can have with the chatbot. And that chatbot pass that intention to RPA, right? So construct that intention and send the request to RPA. RPA then goes and searches multiple systems, get an answer, and give it back, right? A chatbot give an answer back, right? That's a phenomenal success. It usually takes 20 minutes for the customer to stay online, operational user to stay online, calling their back office. This was very successful, but there's a lot of complications in it. It took a lot of time, but these are things we see forthcoming, right? And also with more and more organization getting more and more comfortable, they're also relaxing a little bit of humans in the loop, right? Earlier, we used to have multiple steps where humans had to make the decisions, and taking that event bought RPAs to perform the next process. But now organizations are getting comfortable. I think this trend will continue. But still, the major thing is there's still the security is posing a big challenge for RPA to work seamlessly. But we're finding solutions, finding good solutions to work around as well. But again, it's the checks and balances that are still required for any business processes, whether it is manual or automated. So we feel that will continue. Okay. I will stop there. Sorry, exceeded, but I can still take some questions. Josh?
Yeah, thank you, Chandra. Yeah, let's go ahead and open the live Q&A. If you have any questions, you can use the chat function. Okay, let's see, we're already getting a couple of questions here. Here, Chandra, here's the first question. What are the major challenges in implementing RPA solutions?
So one is the business user, right? So we need to get in that business user. I mean, work with them, building the business case for them, saying that this is a kind of a productivity enhancement option, right? Not replacing any humans, so that humans can put their efforts into more strategic value functions of an organization. That's very important. There, I mean, where we had some resistance, we were able to overcome by proving that, right? And then that's one challenge we faced. The second thing is there's a lot of anxiety and expectations are very high, thinking that RPS can pretty much take care of entire operations. Even though that is true, but that's not the good way of doing, right? So need to make sure, set the right expectations, and then steadily taking there, because we have witnessed stating that where in 6 months we can completely automate this entire business processes, right? So on and so forth. Those simply not true, okay? Because each and every business processes, if they go well, they go well. But if there's if it breaks somewhere something down, that's where, right? So there's a lot of human intervention that's required, because these are all like business sensitive processes. So that expectation has to be managed carefully. The realistic expectations have to be there. That's the second challenge, right? And the third thing is the implementation of it, right? How do you train the user and how do you take it? It has to be, it has to be led, managed by a steady hand.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how do you operate with the legacy technologies?
That's a great question. So there's no silver bullet for that. Okay. A lot of platforms offer connectivity to these legacy systems, especially if you have to share the data, right? How do you have to run the process? How do you have to trigger the process, right? So what we have done is, yes, we enabled RPA solutions. No, we leverage the RPA solutions, but we have written our own scripts to trigger some of these processes, because the legacy systems, the reason, like one reason like why they keep is they're like running stable, secure, people have a lot of belief, right? So it's very difficult for them to give access and let something else to take place. That's a challenge we had. But the good thing is, even though this the new platforms have can connect to these platform. I mean, can connect to these legacy systems. Here we have taken some intermediary steps to make the process flow through.
Well, thank you. Let's go ahead and take one more question just to keep it on time today. Is it true that business users can automate the processes by themselves?
Yes, so it's I'd be very cautious, right? um, so I mean, general principle we take is, right. So based on multiple implementations of RPA, we want to enable the business users, right? Ultimately, business users should know, are better equipped to say which one is less risky, which one is more risky, which one is laborious, right? So, and what can be automated, what can they rely on automation, what needs manual intervention. Okay, so most of these platforms, right, available platforms, they let business users to automate their own processes, right? It's a kind of most of the users, if you can take them to the path of record and replay tools. So it's not as simple as it appears on the RPA solution, but that's the predominant feature they use, right? So they understand when we enable this RPAs, right? So what they will do is they will understand the entire function of the business user, right? And then they record it, right? And then so we can reorganize, and then next instead of business user performing that function, the RPA can do by itself, right? So again, we need to feed some parameters, right? What it can input and what's output it can compare. Yes, it's business users, it's true, but business users need some training, and they also need some hand holding in the initial stages, right? And even when they automate, the process has to be governed and validated. So what we did is we trained business users, we let them automate, and once they automated, we looked at the scripts and we identified the ways to optimize those scripts, and also the optimize the paths it can traverse. Right, that's how we helped. So they had to work hand in hand with the solution providers. That's what I would say, Josh.
Thanks, Chandra. Let's take one more question. We just got a good one in here. Um, how do you convince the on-the-ground users that are important to understand legacy workflows and planning future implementation, but might not be open to RPA implementations as they consider RPA as something that will replace their jobs?
It's a good question. So this is, I touched briefly on this one, right? What we have, especially in the digital transformation, where organizations have to modernize the systems, right? Modernize the systems, it's not an option. They have to do, right? So because they have to allow multiple channels to support their businesses, okay? So what we did was we took the phased approach, right? So in one of the organizations where we're supporting, so we let them modernize the user interface. Well, let the things stay behind the scenes. Users really don't care, right? Or even the operation users don't care much. As long as they get the feed what they want, they're good with it, right? So while we are automating on the modernizing the UI UX part of it, right? The behind the scene processes, right? What we did was on the legacy processes, um, we understood, right? So with the RPA solutions, we understood the current processes, like how they are running, right? How they're running. So we identified the bottlenecks. The good thing is on the RP, and once we understand that entire business processes, because a lot of legacy systems may not have the documentation ready, right? The ideal situation is if you have the documentation, understand from step 1 to step 10 what user has to do and what's the green path scenario and what's the exception scenarios. That's the ideal situation, but it's next to impossible to find such information on the legacy systems, right? So this is where the user's input is necessary, right? One is if you go and talk to the users, it will be very difficult to get that info because they'll have too much information, right, based on their experience. So what we have done is we have let bots to record their processes, right? So their daily functions, right, especially the key business processes, right? So while they're doing, right, so these bots able to map the entire processes, right? And once we understood that processes, right, so we came back and analyzed the frequency of these processes, and we also studied a little bit of from the transactions data, what are the most frequently occurring transactions, right? And based on their knowledge, we also got some characteristics of what's the business critical processes, what happens if it fails, right? All the data we got, okay. And then we sat with the users, right? So this is where talking to the users, right, giving the factual data. For example, as I mentioned, in one of the processes where they had to look into 3 different systems and get the information on 3 different screens, and where they had to stare at screens for an answer to confirm and give the right answer to the user, because it's very important for them, because if they give the wrong answer, they might get 10 different calls, right? Again, this is based on the 20 years of experience, so that's the reason their trust on the new systems is very low. Okay, they want to do right thing one time, even though it's taking time. So we have proved them, right? Whatever they're doing, right? The chatbot, with the help of RPA behind the scene, doing the same accurately again and again. But again, this confidence we were able to build over the period of 6 months, right? Now, while this happened, that's when we're taking that knowledge and we started engaging these users in the new feature development on the modernization effort, right? Now they understood it's not about replacing RPS, replacing them. RPS giving them the bandwidth so that they can provide inputs, and they were made part of the new system development as well, right? This is a great case study, Animesh. I can share it with you. This is a story of 6 months. That engagement really helped them, right? It requires some patience, it requires some understanding, and it requires boosting their confidence with the factual data.
Thank you, Chandra. All right, that's all the time that we're going to have for today. You can get a recording of this webinar. It will be available on our website that's listed right here on the screen. I'd like to thank our guest speaker today, Chandra Alluri. Thank you again. Thank you to our audience, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you all.